The warm June breeze rustled through the trees as Linda Matthews pulled into the Silver Creek Country Club's parking lot. Her hands trembled slightly as she turned off the engine of her blue Toyota Camry. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. Her only son Michael was getting married. Yet something felt oddly unsettling in the pit of her stomach. Linda checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, adjusting her perfectly styled gray-streaked hair and smoothing down her navy blue mother-of-the-groom dress. At 58, she still maintained an elegant appearance. The worry lines had started creeping around her eyes in recent years. The large Victorian-style building loomed before her, its white walls adorned with flowing ribbons and fresh flower arrangements. Linda grabbed her purse and the special gift she had brought for the bride, making her way toward the entrance. Several guests were already arriving, their excited chatter filling the air. "Mrs. Matthews, you're here," called out Jenny, her son's childhood friend who was helping coordinate the wedding. The young woman rushed over, clipboard in hand. "The bridal suite is on the second floor, third door on the right. Sarah's been asking about you." Linda nodded, trying to mask her nervousness. She had only met Sarah, her future daughter-in-law, 4 times before today. The couple's whirlwind romance had taken everyone by surprise. Michael and Sarah had gotten engaged just 3 months after meeting at a mutual friend's birthday party. As Linda climbed the grand staircase, her mind wandered to the past. She remembered Michael as a little boy, playing in their backyard, scraping his knees, and declaring he would never get married because girls were yucky. Now here he was, 32 years old, and about to start his own family. The corridor leading to the bridal suite was lined with vintage photographs of other weddings that had taken place at Silver Creek. Linda paused briefly before the heavy wooden door, took a deep breath, and knocked. "Come in," several voices called out in unison. The scene that greeted Linda was one of organized chaos. Bridesmaids in pale pink dresses bustled about, fixing each other's hair and adjusting makeup. The air was thick with the scent of hairspray and perfume, and there, in the center of it all, stood Sarah. Linda's breath caught in her throat. The bride looked stunning in her white lace gown, her blonde hair arranged in elegant curls. But it wasn't the dress or the hair that captured Linda's attention. It was the necklace adorning Sarah's slender neck. A string of perfectly matched pearls, connected by an unmistakable Art Deco clasp with 3 small diamonds arranged in a triangle pattern. Linda felt her world tilt slightly as she stared at the piece of jewelry she thought she would never see again. "Linda, I'm so happy you're here," Sarah exclaimed, moving forward to embrace her future mother-in-law. The pearls gleamed under the bright vanity lights, seeming to mock Linda with every movement. Fighting to keep her composure, Linda returned the hug mechanically. "You look beautiful, dear," she managed to say, her voice slightly hoarse. That's quite a lovely necklace you're wearing." Sarah beamed, touching the pearls gently. "Isn't it gorgeous? It's my something old. My grandmother gave it to me this morning. She said she's been saving it for my wedding day ever since she bought it at an estate sale years ago." The room suddenly felt too warm, too crowded. Linda's mind raced back to that terrible day 25 years ago when she had returned home to find their house ransacked, their valuables stolen. Among the missing items had been her great-grandmother's pearl necklace, the very same one that now rested against Sarah's throat. "Mrs. Matthews, are you feeling all right? You've gone quite pale," one of the bridesmaids observed with concern. Linda forced a smile, just a bit overwhelmed. It's not every day your only son gets married. She fumbled in her purse, pulling out a small wrapped package. "Sarah, this is for you. A little something old of our family's too." As Sarah began unwrapping the gift, Linda's thoughts whirled with questions. Could this really be her family's necklace? How had it ended up at an estate sale? And most importantly, what was she going to do about this shocking discovery on her son's wedding day? The cheerful chaos of the bridal suite continued around her, but Linda stood frozen, knowing that this day was about to become far more complicated than anyone could have imagined. The wedding ceremony was set to begin in 30 minutes, and Linda couldn't stop staring at the pearl necklace around Sarah's neck. From her position in the front row of the small chapel, she had a perfect view of the bridal party as they made their final preparations. Michael stood at the altar, handsome in his black tuxedo, nervously adjusting his bow tie every few minutes. He caught his mother's eye and gave her a warm smile, completely unaware of the turmoil brewing inside her. Linda's hands clutched her small purse tightly as memories flooded back. She could still picture that necklace on her own mother during special occasions, the way the pearls seemed to glow against her skin. The police had told them back then that stolen jewelry often ended up being sold quickly, passing through many hands until its origin was impossible to trace. The wedding coordinator began seating the last of the guests. Among them was Eleanor Wilson, Sarah's grandmother, who Linda had only met briefly at the engagement party. The elderly woman walked with a cane now, her silver hair neatly styled, wearing an expensive-looking pale blue dress. As the music started and the bridesmaids began their procession, Linda's mind drifted to that horrible day in 1999. She had come home from grocery shopping to find their front door slightly ajar. Inside, drawers had been emptied, furniture overturned. The small jewelry box that had contained the pearl necklace was gone, along with other family heirlooms. The wedding march began to play, snapping Linda back to the present. Sarah appeared at the entrance, radiant in her white gown, her father beside her. The pearls caught the light as she moved, and Linda noticed something she hadn't seen before, a tiny scratch on the clasp, exactly where she remembered her daughter Amy had accidentally scraped it while playing dress-up years ago. Throughout the ceremony, Linda barely heard the words being spoken. She watched as Michael and Sarah exchanged vows, her eyes continually drawn to the necklace. Each time Sarah moved, the pearls seemed to taunt her, like pieces of her past dancing just out of reach. If anyone can show just cause why this couple cannot lawfully be joined together in matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. Linda felt her heart pound. For a brief moment, she considered standing up right there in front of everyone. But the sight of her son's happy face stopped her. This was his wedding day. She couldn't ruin it with accusations that might not even be true. After the ceremony, during the photography session, Linda found herself standing near Eleanor Wilson. The older woman was watching the photographer arrange the bridal party, a proud smile on her face. "Such a beautiful necklace Sarah's wearing," Linda said carefully, testing the waters. "You must have been very lucky to find it at an estate sale." Eleanor's expression flickered for just a moment, so briefly that Linda might have missed it if she hadn't been watching closely. "Yes, quite fortunate," Eleanor replied, her voice slightly strained. "It was such a long time ago, I barely remember the details." "It's remarkable how similar it looks to one my family lost years ago," Linda continued, keeping her tone conversational. "Even has the same diamond pattern on the clasp." Eleanor's hand tightened on her cane. "Well, you know how jewelry from that era often had similar designs," she said quickly, then excused herself to go speak with another guest. Linda watched her hurry away, noting how the older woman's usual graceful demeanor had suddenly become agitated. Something wasn't right, and Linda was now certain that the necklace around Sarah's neck was more than just a coincidence. As the wedding party moved toward the reception hall, Linda pulled her phone from her purse. With trembling fingers, she found an old photo she had digitized years ago, her mother wearing the pearl necklace at Linda's own wedding. She zoomed in on the image, comparing every detail she could see to the necklace Sarah wore. The diamond pattern on the clasp, the slightly irregular shape of the third pearl from the center, even the way the string was knotted between each pearl, it was all identical. Linda felt her suspicions solidify into certainty. Now she faced an impossible choice: speak up and risk ruining her son's wedding day, or stay silent and watch her family's stolen heirloom remain in the hands of strangers who were now, for better or worse, family themselves. The reception hall buzzed with energy as guests enjoyed their dinner. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the elegantly decorated tables, and the sound of clinking glasses and laughter filled the air. Linda sat at the family table, pushing her salmon around her plate, trying to find the right moment to approach Sarah about the necklace. Michael kept glancing at his mother with concern. He had known her long enough to tell when something was bothering her, but this was his wedding day, and he was torn between checking on her and attending to his other guests. "Mom, is everything okay?" he finally asked, leaning over during a quiet moment. "You barely touched your food." Linda forced a smile. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. Just feeling a bit emotional today." She patted his hand reassuringly, not wanting to burden him with her suspicions. The DJ announced it was time for the father-daughter dance, and everyone's attention turned to Sarah and her father swaying to Butterfly Kisses on the dance floor. The pearls caught the light with every movement, making Linda's heart ache with memories. When the dance ended, Linda saw her opportunity. Sarah was alone for a moment, getting a glass of water from the bar. Taking a deep breath, Linda approached her new daughter-in-law. "Sarah, dear, could we talk for a moment?" Linda asked gently. "Perhaps somewhere a bit quieter?" Sarah's face lit up. Of course. She followed Linda to a small alcove near the garden entrance, where the music was muffled enough for conversation. Linda chose her words carefully. "I couldn't help but notice your beautiful necklace. Your grandmother mentioned she bought it at an estate sale?" "Yes, she did," Sarah replied, touching the pearls fondly. "She told me she found it in 1999 at an estate sale in Riverside. The moment she saw it, she knew she wanted to save it for her future granddaughter's wedding day." Linda's breath caught. Riverside was their old neighborhood, where the burglary had happened. Did she mention which estate sale specifically? Sarah's brow furrowed slightly. "I don't think so. Is everything all right, Linda? You seem very interested in the necklace." Taking out her phone, Linda pulled up the old wedding photo she had looked at earlier. "Sarah, I need to show you something, but I want you to understand that this isn't easy for me." She handed Sarah the phone. The young bride's eyes widened as she looked at the picture, then down at her own necklace, then back at the photo. They're identical," Sarah whispered, her face growing pale. "That necklace in the photo was my great-grandmother's," Linda explained softly. "It was stolen from our house in 1999, along with other family jewelry. The house was broken into while I was out shopping." Sarah's hands began to tremble. "But that's impossible. My grandmother wouldn't. She couldn't." Her voice trailed off as tears welled up in her eyes. "I'm not accusing anyone," Linda said quickly, though her heart was racing. I needed to tell you. That necklace was meant to be passed down through our family. It was supposed to go to my daughter Amy, but she never got the chance to wear it." Sarah's face crumpled. "Oh God, what am I going to do? Should I take it off? I don't want to wear it if it's stolen." "But Grandma Eleanor, there has to be some explanation." Linda felt a pang of guilt seeing Sarah's distress. "Maybe we should talk to your grandmother together. There might be a perfectly reasonable explanation for all of this." Just then, Eleanor appeared in the doorway of the alcove, her face ashen. She had apparently overheard at least part of their conversation. "There's no need for explanations," Eleanor said, her voice quavering. "Linda is right. The necklace is hers." Both Linda and Sarah stared at the elderly woman in shock. The music from the reception continued to play in the background, a jarring contrast to the tension in their quiet corner. "Grandma!" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Eleanor leaned heavily on her cane, looking smaller and older than she had just hours before. "I think it's time I told you both a story I've been carrying for 25 years. But first, I need to sit down." The three women moved to a nearby table, each of them knowing that whatever came next would change their families forever. Eleanor Wilson's hands shook as she lowered herself into a chair at the quiet corner table. Linda and Sarah sat across from her, both women tense with anticipation. The sounds of the wedding reception seemed distant now, like they were in their own bubble of suspended time. "I never meant for any of this to happen," Eleanor began, her voice thick with emotion. "Back in 1999, my husband George had just lost his job. We were about to lose our house, and the medical bills from his heart surgery were piling up." Sarah reached across the table to hold her grandmother's hand. She had never seen the strong-willed woman look so vulnerable. "We lived just 3 blocks from the Matthews family back then," Eleanor continued, unable to meet Linda's eyes. "I used to walk past their house every morning. Sometimes I'd see Linda gardening or playing with her children. They seemed to have such a perfect life." Linda felt a chill run down her spine as she remembered those days, completely unaware that she was being watched. "One day, I saw Linda leave for groceries. I knew her routine by then." Eleanor's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "I was desperate. George needed his medication, and we had no money left. I noticed their side window was slightly open." Sarah gasped softly, her free hand flying to the pearls at her neck. Linda sat perfectly still, her face unreadable. "I had never stolen anything before," Eleanor continued, tears now rolling down her wrinkled cheeks. "I took the jewelry box and a few other valuable-looking items. Most of it I sold quickly to a pawn shop 2 towns over. But when I opened the jewelry box and saw the pearl necklace..." She paused, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "It was so beautiful. I told myself I would sell it eventually, but I kept putting it off. Then George passed away 3 months later, and I couldn't bear to part with it. It had become my shame and my treasure all at once. The DJ's voice boomed in the background, announcing the upcoming bouquet toss. None of the three women moved. As the years went by, it became harder to admit what I'd done. Eleanor said, I convinced myself that keeping the necklace was my punishment. When Sarah got engaged, I thought giving it to her might somehow make things right. Let it be loved and worn again. Linda finally spoke, her voice steady but strained. Did you know that necklace was passed down through 4 generations of my family? My daughter Amy cried for weeks when it was stolen. She was only 12 then. Eleanor's shoulders sagged under the weight of Linda's words. I know nothing I say can make up for what I did. I've lived with this guilt for 25 years. Every time I saw a police car, my heart would stop. Every time I read about burglaries in the paper, I felt sick. Sarah sat in stunned silence, tears streaming down her face, smudging her carefully applied makeup. The pearls felt heavy against her skin now, like they were burning with the truth of their history. I should go to the police, Eleanor said quietly. I know it's long overdue, but it's the right thing to do. Linda looked at the broken woman before her, then at her new daughter-in-law's devastated face. She thought about her son Michael, dancing and laughing with his friends, completely unaware of the drama unfolding in this corner. No, Linda said firmly, surprising both Sarah and Eleanor. Going to the police now won't undo the past. It would only hurt more people, especially Michael and Sarah. But Mom's necklace, Sarah began, already reaching to remove it. Linda held up her hand. Wait, I think we need to find a different way to handle this. One that doesn't destroy our families on what should be a day of celebration. Eleanor stared at Linda in disbelief. After what I did, you're willing to keep this secret? I'm not saying I forgive you, Linda replied carefully, but I am saying that sometimes healing is more important than justice. However, she added, her voice growing firmer, we need to figure out what happens next. That necklace represents both the worst and best of our families now, a terrible choice made in desperation, and a chance for redemption through love. The three women sat in heavy silence, each lost in their own thoughts, as the party continued around them. None of them knew yet how they would move forward from this moment, but they all understood that their lives had changed forever in ways they never could have imagined when this wedding day began. Michael noticed something was wrong the moment he saw his wife's face. Sarah had returned from her conversation with Linda and Eleanor looking shaken, though she tried to hide it behind a bright smile. As she rejoined him on the dance floor, you could feel tension in her usually relaxed shoulders. Everything okay, honey? He asked, pulling her close during a slow song, the pearls of her necklace pressed cold against his chest. Sarah looked up at him, conflict clear in her eyes. Michael, there's something I need to tell you, but not here. Can we step outside for a minute? The garden outside the reception hall was lit with tiny white lights, creating a magical atmosphere that contrasted sharply with the heavy conversation about to take place. They found a quiet bench near a bubbling fountain, away from the few guests who were getting fresh air. The necklace I'm wearing, Sarah began, her voice trembling, it belongs to your mother. It was stolen from your family 25 years ago. Michael stared at her, uncomprehending. What? That's impossible. Your grandmother gave it to you. Sarah took a deep breath and told him everything. The burglary, his mother's recognition of the necklace, and finally, Eleanor's confession. As she spoke, she watched her husband's face change from confusion to shocked and anger. Your grandmother broke into my mother's house. His voice rose slightly. Do you know what losing that necklace did to my sister? To my mom? Please keep your voice down, Sarah pleaded, glancing nervously at the reception hall windows. I had no idea, Michael. I'm just as shocked as you are. Michael stood up and began pacing. We have to go to the police. This is theft. My mom deserves justice. Your mother doesn't want that, Sarah said quietly. She said she wants to find another way to handle this. Another way? What other way is there? Michael ran his hands through his hair in frustration. This isn't just about a necklace. It's about trust, about family. How can we trust your grandmother after this? Sarah felt tears welling up again. She was desperate, Michael. Her husband was dying. They were about to lose everything. Don't defend her, Michael snapped, then immediately regretted his harsh tone when he saw Sarah flinch. I'm sorry, I just... This is a lot to process. On our wedding day of all days. Inside the reception hall, the party continued in full swing. They could hear the muffled sound of IMCA playing, and their guests' laughter carried through the open windows. "What do you want to do?" Sarah asked softly. "Whatever you decide, I'll support you. If you want to go to the police, I understand." Michael sat back down beside her, taking her hands in his. "I don't know. I need to talk to my mom first. And Amy. God, how are we going to tell Amy?" Just then, Linda appeared in the garden doorway. She had been watching them through the window and couldn't bear to see them struggling alone. She walked over to the bench, her heels clicking softly on the stone path. "Mom," Michael started, standing up, but Linda raised her hand to stop him. "I know Sarah told you everything," she said gently, "and I can see you're angry. You have every right to be." "Why aren't you?" Michael demanded. "Why aren't you furious? Why don't you want to press charges?" Linda sat down between them, taking one of each of their hands. "Because I've learned something in my 58 years, Michael. Sometimes justice isn't about punishment. Sometimes it's about finding a way forward that heals instead of hurts. But what she did was terrible," Linda finished for him. "Yes, but look at what that terrible thing led to." She squeezed their hands. "It led to you two finding each other, to our families joining together. Maybe that's worth more than revenge." Sarah wiped away a tear. "What do we do now?" Linda looked thoughtful. "First, we go back inside and celebrate your wedding. Tomorrow, we'll all sit down together, including Eleanor, and figure out how to move forward. But right now, your guests are probably wondering where their bride and groom have disappeared to." As if on cue, the DJ's voice boomed through the open windows. "Where are our newlyweds? It's time for the cake cutting." Michael helped both women to their feet, his face still troubled but softer now. As they walked back toward the reception, none of them noticed Eleanor watching from an upstairs window, her heart heavy with both regret and hope. The morning after the wedding, tension hung thick in the air at the Matthews family home. Linda had arranged for everyone to meet and discuss the situation. The living room, usually warm and welcoming, felt more like a courtroom as Eleanor Wilson sat nervously in an armchair, while Michael, Sarah, Linda, and Amy gathered on the sofas around her. Amy, Michael's younger sister, had arrived early that morning after receiving an urgent call from her mother. Now 37, she bore a striking resemblance to Linda, down to the way she held herself with barely contained emotion. "So," Amy began, breaking the uncomfortable silence, "that's the necklace I used to try on when I was little." Her eyes fixed on the pearls that Sarah had brought with her, now lying in their center on the coffee table. Eleanor nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Yes, and before I say anything else, I want you to know how deeply sorry I am." "Sorry doesn't begin to cover it," Amy said sharply. "Do you have any idea what losing this meant to us? It wasn't just jewelry. It was our history, our memories." Sarah reached for Michael's hand, squeezing it gently. He had barely slept the night before, tossing and turning as he processed the revelation about their family's connection. "Perhaps," Linda suggested softly, "Eleanor could explain everything to Amy. The whole story, just as she told us yesterday." Eleanor took a shaky breath and began recounting the events of 1999 once again. As she spoke about her desperate circumstances, her husband's illness, and their financial ruin, Amy's expression gradually shifted from anger to something more complex. "After George died," Eleanor continued, her voice breaking, "I lost myself in grief and guilt. The necklace became both my shame and my salvation. Every time I looked at it, I remembered what I'd done, but I couldn't bear to part with it. It felt like the only thing keeping George's memory alive." Amy stood up abruptly and walked to the window, her back to the room. "I used to imagine someone wearing Mom's necklace at fancy parties, not knowing its real story. I never thought." She turned back to face Eleanor. "Did you ever wear it?" Eleanor shook her head vigorously. "Never. I couldn't. I kept it locked away in a small box at the back of my closet for years. The only time it's seen the light of day was when I gave it to Sarah for the wedding." "Which makes this situation even more complicated," Linda added. "The necklace has now become part of both our family's stories, though in very different ways." Sarah spoke up for the first time since the meeting began. "I want to return it, of course. It belongs to your family." She reached for the necklace on the table, but Linda stopped her. Wait, Linda said. I've been thinking about this all night. What if there's a way this necklace could help heal the rift between our families instead of widening it? Everyone looked at her curiously. Eleanor, Linda continued, you've carried this guilt for 25 years. Amy, you've carried the loss for just as long. Michael and Sarah, your marriage has brought our families together, despite this painful history. Maybe the necklace could become a symbol of redemption rather than regret. What are you suggesting? Michael asked, leaning forward. What if we shared it? Linda looked around the room. What if the necklace became a bridge between our families? It could be passed between us on special occasions, carrying new memories alongside the old ones. The room fell silent as everyone considered this unexpected proposal. Amy was the first to respond. Mom, are you sure? After everything. I'm sure, Linda said firmly. Eleanor's actions were wrong, but they came from a place of desperation, not malice. And now, 25 years later, we have a chance to turn this story into something meaningful. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve such kindness. No, Amy agreed, her voice tight with emotion. Maybe that's exactly why it's the right thing to do. Sarah stood up slowly, picking up the necklace. She walked over to Amy and held it out. Would you like to be the first to wear it again? Amy stared at the pearls she had dreamed about for so many years, then looked at her mother. Linda nodded encouragingly, and Amy carefully took the necklace, its familiar weight bringing back a flood of childhood memories. As she fastened it around her neck, something shifted in the room. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, that would take more time, but it was a start, a first step toward healing wounds that had been hidden for far too long. 3 months after the wedding, the Matthews and Wilson families gathered at Linda's house for Sunday dinner. It was their first formal meal together since the revelation about the necklace, though there had been several careful conversations and meetings in between. The pearl necklace lay in its new special box on Linda's mantelpiece, where it would stay when not being worn by either family. They had created a small journal to go with it, recording each time it was shared and the occasion it marked. The roast smells wonderful, Eleanor said as she helped Linda set the table. The two women had developed an unexpected understanding over the past months, born from honest conversations and shared regrets. Sarah watched them from the living room doorway, remembering how different things had been at her wedding. I never thought we'd get here, she said to Amy, who was arranging flowers in a vase nearby. Neither did I, Amy admitted. But Mom was right about making something new from something broken. She glanced at the necklace in its place of honor, though I still have moments when I get angry about it all. That's okay, Sarah replied softly. Grandma says she wants us to be honest about our feelings. She says hiding the truth is what caused all this in the first place. Michael emerged from the kitchen carrying a bowl of mashed potatoes. The initial shock and anger had faded from his face over the past months, replaced by a thoughtful acceptance. He was learning to see Eleanor not as the woman who had stolen from his family, but as someone who had made a terrible choice in a moment of desperation. Dinner's ready, Linda announced, bringing out the roast. Everyone, please sit down. As they gathered around the table, there was still an undercurrent of tension, but it was softer now, tempered by time and understanding. Linda had made place cards, carefully arranging everyone so the families were mixed together rather than sitting on separate sides. Before we eat, Eleanor said, standing shakily with her glass of water, I'd like to say something. She pulled a folded paper from her pocket. I've been working with my therapist on this. The table fell silent as Eleanor unfolded her note with trembling hands. These past 3 months have taught me more about courage and forgiveness than I learned in all my previous years, she began. When I took that necklace 25 years ago, I broke more than just a window. I broke trust, hope, and family memories. Sarah reached for Michael's hand under the table as her grandmother continued. But through some miracle I don't deserve, that same necklace has now become a symbol of healing. Eleanor's voice grew stronger. Every time I see it in its new place here, I'm reminded that good can come from even our worst mistakes, if we're brave enough to face them. Amy dabbed at her eyes with her napkin. Though she had struggled the most with forgiveness, she had also been the one to suggest adding Eleanor's story to the necklace's journal, saying that every part of its history mattered. I've made a decision, Eleanor continued. I've set up a trust fund with what's left of my savings. It's not much, but it will grow. When my time comes, it will be divided between both families, with one condition, that it be used for education or starting a business. I want to ensure that no one in either of our families ever feels so desperate that they make the choices I did. Linda stood up and walked to Eleanor's side, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. That's very generous, Eleanor, but not necessary. It is necessary, Eleanor insisted. Not as payment, there's no paying back what I took, but as a promise to the future. To any grandchildren or great-grandchildren who might one day wear those pearls and read our story. Michael cleared his throat. Speaking of the future, he looked at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. We have an announcement to make. Sarah's pregnant. The tension in the room dissolved instantly as everyone began talking at once, offering congratulations and asking questions. Linda hugged Sarah while Amy wiped away more tears, this time happy ones. Eleanor sat back down, overwhelmed by emotion. Her great-grandchild would wear the necklace someday, knowing its full story, both the darkness and the light. As they finally began passing dishes around the table, the pearl necklace gleamed quietly from its place on the mantel, no longer a secret to be hidden, but a testament to the complicated, messy, beautiful way families could heal and grow together. 1 year later, the living room of the Matthews home was filled with the sound of a baby's laughter. 6-month-old Emma, dressed in a tiny pink dress, sat on Linda's lap while Sarah carefully opened the familiar box containing the pearl necklace. Are you sure she's not too young to hear the story? Michael asked, watching his daughter reach for the gleaming pearls with curious fingers. You're never too young for family history, Linda replied, gently moving Emma's hands away from the necklace. Besides, this will be the first entry in the journal with her name in it. The journal had grown thick with entries over the past year. Each family member had worn the necklace for special occasions. Amy at her job promotion celebration, Sarah at her baby shower, Linda at her retirement party, and even Eleanor at her 75th birthday gathering. Eleanor sat in her usual armchair, looking more peaceful than she had in years. The therapy sessions had helped her find a way to live with her past actions while embracing the unexpected gift of redemption she'd been given. Should we show her the pictures? Sarah asked, pulling out the family photo album. They had created a special section documenting the necklace's journey through both families, starting with the oldest photo of Linda's great-grandmother wearing it at her own wedding. Let me read her my entry first, Amy said, opening the journal to her latest page. She had worn the necklace just last week for an important presentation at work. Dear Emma, she read, today the pearls gave me courage when I needed it most. Each one reminded me that our family's strength comes not from being perfect, but from how we handle our imperfections. Emma cooed and reached toward her aunt's voice, the room filled with gentle laughter. My turn, Eleanor said softly. She had recently added her own entry, something she'd been working on for months. Dear great-granddaughter, long before you were born, these pearls taught me that the truth, no matter how difficult, sets us free. They taught me that love is stronger than shame, and that family means finding grace in unexpected places. Linda watched as tears formed in Sarah's eyes. Her daughter-in-law's pregnancy had brought their families even closer together, turning Sunday dinners into a weekly tradition that everyone looked forward to. Speaking of family, Michael said, clearing his throat, Sarah and I have been talking. We'd like to start a new tradition with the necklace. Everyone looked at him curiously. We want to add a pearl to it every year on Emma's birthday, Sarah explained. Not to change its history, but to add to it. Each new pearl will represent another year of healing and growth between our families. Linda felt her heart swell with emotion. That's a beautiful idea. I'll pay for the pearls, Eleanor offered quickly, but Michael shook his head. We'll all contribute, he said firmly. One family, sharing everything, the cost, the responsibility, and the joy. Emma chose that moment to let out a happy squeal, making everyone smile. Linda lifted the baby up to see her reflection in the mirror above the mantel, the pearls catching the light behind them. Look, sweet girl, she whispered. This is your family's story. All of it. The mistakes, the pain, the forgiveness, and the love. Someday you'll add your own chapter to it. As if understanding, Emma reached out toward their reflection, her tiny hand opening and closing in wonder. Sarah picked up the journal and a pen. Should we write today's entry together? she suggested. All of us. They gathered around the coffee table, each taking turns adding a line to mark Emma's first official introduction to the necklace's story. As they wrote, the pearls seemed to glow with their own inner light, no longer haunted by the shadow of their troubled past. Eleanor was the last to add her words. With a steady hand, she wrote, "Today, we witnessed a miracle, not the kind that changes the past, but the kind that transforms it into something beautiful for the future." As the sun set outside, casting warm light through the windows, the expanded family sat together, sharing stories and dreams. The pearl necklace lay in its open box, no longer a symbol of division but a bridge connecting past to present, hurt to healing, and most importantly, one family to another. Emma fell asleep in her mother's arms, peaceful and secure, unaware that she had already become part of a story that would be told for generations to come, a story about how love and forgiveness could turn even the darkest moments into stepping stones toward a brighter future.